"Sir, can you pretend to be my husband just for one day?" The whisper cut through the morning air, and in that instant, Eli Turner knew his quiet life was about to collide with a storm that could tear them all apart. The bag of horse feed was still heavy on Eli Turner's shoulder when the voice stopped him in his tracks. "Sir, can you pretend to be my husband? Just for one day?" He turned slowly, the Montana sun slanting low enough to stretch shadows across the cracked sidewalk of Farrell's main street. The woman who had spoken stood a few paces behind him, chest heaving as though she'd been running. She was pale, her hair tangled from the wind, her coat threadbare against the October chill. In one hand she clutched a child's backpack, the fabric fraying at the seams, as if it had been dragged through too many hurried escapes. Panic gleamed in her eyes, not the scattered kind of someone unhinged, but the sharp, desperate terror of someone cornered. Eli blinked, unsure if he'd misheard. "What?" She stepped closer, her words tumbling out fast. "I know it sounds insane, but if that man sees me alone again, he'll take my daughter. Please, just today, just help me look like I'm not alone." Her gaze darted past him, across the street. Eli followed it and saw a dark sedan with government plates idling near the curb. A man in a trench coat leaned against the hood, clipboard in hand, scanning the sidewalk as though he already knew how this day would end. His stance was casual, but his eyes were predatory. Eli's first instinct was the same one he always had in town. Keep walking, keep his head down. Trouble had a way of finding men like him faster than it left. He was a woodcarver, a black man in a mostly white town, a man who lived by the silence of cedar groves and the rhythm of his own two hands. He didn't borrow problems, and he sure didn't invite them. "You've got the wrong guy," he said quietly, shifting the strap of the feed bag. "No," the woman whispered, shaking her head. "I saw you earlier, the way you looked at that boy outside the cafe, the one begging for change. You didn't walk away." Her voice cracked, but her eyes burned with urgency. "My name is Emily. My daughter's name is Maisie. She's 6. Please, just walk me across the street like we belong together. That's all I'm asking." The man by the sedan straightened, noticing them. He began to cross the street, his long strides cutting through the morning air. Something tightened in Eli's chest. The woman's desperation wasn't performance. It was survival. Against the heaviness in his gut, the old voice that warned him to keep out, something else flared, something he hadn't felt in years. He stepped closer to her, calm settling over him like a second skin. "I'm Eli Turner," he said. "Take my arm." Emily's breath hitched, but she slipped her trembling hand through the crook of his elbow. Together they crossed the street, their pace steady, deliberate. From a distance, they could have been mistaken for partners, for a small family on an ordinary morning. The agent blocked their path midway. "Ma'am," he said coolly, "we were scheduled for an evaluation at 10 o'clock. You missed it." Emily's lips parted, but no words came. Eli squeezed her arm gently, grounding her, then answered for her. "She didn't miss anything. We're together now." The man's gaze flicked to Eli, suspicious. "And you are?" "Her husband." Eli didn't blink. "Name's Eli Turner. We've been going through a rough patch, but I'm taking her and the girl home today." The agent frowned. "You're not listed in any file. No marriage license, no shared residence." Eli adjusted the feed bag on his shoulder, letting the weight anchor him. "We don't live by paperwork. I built our place up the mountain myself. You want proof? Come see it." A small face appeared at the backseat window of the sedan. A little girl with wide blue eyes clutching a stuffed rabbit like it was her only anchor. She looked at him as if holding her breath. Eli felt the truth of the moment settle heavy on his bones. This wasn't about performance anymore. The agent lingered, pen hovering over his clipboard. Then he stepped aside. "I'll be following up. Don't disappear." "We won't," Eli said. They walked the last few paces together until Emily broke into a run. The car door flew open and Maisie launched herself into her mother's arms. Emily's voice broke as she whispered, "Mama's here, baby. I'm here." Maisie peeked up, eyes darting to the tall man with the quiet face. "Who's he?" Emily hesitated, then said softly, "That's Daddy." The word hung in the air like a fragile bridge no one expected to stand. Maisie tilted her head, studying him, then reached out a small hand. Eli stared for a beat that stretched too long, then slowly took it. Her fingers were warm, trusting. And in that instant, what had begun as pretend pressed itself into something startlingly real. The feed bag was long forgotten in the back of Eli's truck by the time they climbed the winding road into the pines. The air thinned, sharper here, the scent of cedar and wood smoke clinging to everything. Emily sat stiff in the passenger seat, her hands wrapped around Maisie as if the girl might vanish if she loosened her grip. The child hummed softly against her mother's chest, clutching the stuffed rabbit that seemed to guard her as fiercely as Eli had on the street. The cabin emerged from the fog like something carved out of the mountain itself. Stone hearth, stacked logs, chimney still breathing a curl of smoke into the cold afternoon sky. Eli parked, shut off the engine, and for a long moment, none of them moved. Emily's eyes flicked over the porch, the woodshed, the handmade railing. It was simple, sturdy, more real than any paper promise. "You really live alone up here?" she asked finally, her voice caught somewhere between disbelief and longing. "Lived," Eli corrected. His tone was even, but something deeper moved in it. "Until now, I guess." Inside, the warmth wrapped around them. Pine walls, hand-built shelves, a table with scars from years of use. The fire snapped and crackled, chasing away October's bite. Maisie's small face softened in the glow. She slid from her mother's lap and curled up on the couch, nestling the rabbit under her chin. Eli pointed toward the back room. "You two take the bed. I'll sleep on the floor." "You've done too much already," Emily whispered. He met her eyes for the first time without looking away. "Then let me do a little more." The silence that followed was thick, not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken truths. The fire burned low as Emily sat at the table, hands trembling around the mug of milk Eli had warmed for her. "Why did you help me?" she asked finally. Eli didn't look up. His gaze stayed fixed on the hearth, the embers glowing like memories he couldn't put out. "You said you needed someone to pretend. I've done a lot of pretending too. Pretending I was fine. Pretending loss didn't hollow me out." Her throat tightened. She wanted to press, to ask what kind of loss, but his voice dropped lower. "You don't have to explain everything tonight, but you don't have to run anymore either." Emily's eyes glistened. She looked at Maisie, already fast asleep beneath the quilt. Just one day, she thought. Just survive this one day. But when the sun rose pale the next morning, Eli was already awake, grinding coffee beans with steady hands, the rhythm filling the cabin. Emily stirred from the couch, blinking against the light, and for the first time in months, she felt her daughter's chest rise and fall beside her in deep, untroubled sleep. "You weren't kidding," she murmured, wrapping the quilt tighter around her shoulders. "This place smells like cedar and quiet." Eli poured her a mug, steam rising between them. "Most days that's all it is." Emily took it, sipping carefully. Her hands shook less now. "Thank you for yesterday." Eli sat across from her, the lines in his face drawn by years of solitude. "Still don't know why I said yes." "Maybe we were both desperate at the same moment," she said softly. Maisie woke soon after, rubbing her eyes. "Mama," she whispered, "is the man still here?" Emily smoothed her daughter's hair. "Yes, sweetheart. His name is Mr. Eli." Maisie glanced toward him, then whispered, "It smells like pancakes." Emily chuckled, but Eli rose without a word, disappearing into the shed. He returned with a basket of eggs and flour in his rough hands. Later, as the skillet hissed and Maisie giggled at the single old hen Eli still kept. "Ruth, like the Bible." Emily stood at the porch, arms wrapped around herself, and watched the man who had been a stranger just yesterday. But peace never lasted long. The sound came first, faint but deliberate, tires on gravel, too slow, too controlled. Eli stiffened where he stood. Emily caught the flicker in his eyes and knew someone was coming. And in that instant, the illusion of safety inside cedar walls fractured, replaced by a truth she'd tried to deny. Blaine Harrow wasn't done hunting them. The knock didn't sound like a neighbor. 3 sharp raps, too precise to be casual. Eli was drying his hands with a dish towel when the sound rooted him to the floor. For half a second, the cabin held its breath. The fire snapped. Maisie hummed softly to herself as she drew with a broken red crayon. Emily froze mid-motion at the table. Eli moved to the window. He parted the curtain just enough to see a black sedan with government plates crouched at the edge of the clearing, its metal frame gleaming like a predator's eye. 2 figures stood at the porch. A man with silver-streaked hair, navy suit pressed to perfection, a leather folder tucked beneath his arm. Beside him, a woman broad-shouldered and cold-eyed, her posture rigid with authority. Eli's voice was flat when he spoke. "They're here." Emily's breath hitched. "Is it him?" He nodded once, and he brought back up. She gathered Maisie into her lap, pressing a kiss against her daughter's temple. "Sweetheart, I need you to be very brave. If anyone asks, you tell the truth, but short, simple. Remember what Mama said, no one is taking you anywhere." Maisie nodded, though her small fingers twisted the rabbit's ears so tightly Eli worried the seams would rip. Eli opened the door. Cold air swept in, carrying the metallic scent of damp earth. "Can I help you?" The man extended a card. "Mr. Turner, I'm Blaine Harrow, Department of Family Services. This is Officer Juliet Mendes from the local precinct. We received a report of a woman and child residing on this property. We're conducting a welfare check." Eli didn't take the card. He crossed his arms over his chest. "You got a warrant?" Blaine's smile was thin. "Just routine, a formality. The sooner we speak with the mother and child, the sooner we're out of your hair." "They're resting," Eli said evenly. "Had a rough night." Mendes stepped forward, her tone clipped. "Sir, we have all grounds to speak to the child. Cooperate now, or we come back with backup." A beat of silence stretched taut as wire, then Eli's jaw shifted. "1 minute." He shut the door, locking it. Emily's eyes were wide when he turned. "It's him," she whispered, her face pale. "You say nothing unless you have to," Eli instructed. "Don't lie, don't volunteer anything. Let me handle the rest." When he opened the door again, the mask on his face was unreadable. 10 minutes, he said. They stepped inside like surveyors, eyes sweeping across every detail, the patched wallpaper, the worn boots by the door, the fire burning low. Blaine's gaze lingered on Emily, a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Emily rose. "Been a while." She stood, chin lifted. "I didn't invite you here." "Maisie," Blaine called smoothly, ignoring her. "Come here, sweetheart." The girl pressed closer to her mother's leg. Mendes crouched, removing her sunglasses. Her voice softened. "Hi there, Maisie. I'm Officer Mendes. We just want to make sure everything's okay. Can I ask you a few questions?" Emily stroked her daughter's back. "It's all right." Maisie stepped forward reluctantly, rabbit in hand. "What's your full name?" Mendes asked gently. "Maisie Grace Rose," she whispered. "Do you feel safe here with your mom?" Maisie nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." Mendes smiled. "And do you know who this man is?" She gestured toward Eli. Maisie peeked up, a shy smile tugging at her lips. "That's Mr. Eli. He has a chicken named Ruth." Mendes chuckled. Blaine didn't. His eyes narrowed. "And who is Mr. Eli to you?" Before Emily could speak, Eli stepped in, his voice steady. "Her fiancé." The room seemed to tilt. Emily blinked, then nodded firmly, matching the lie. "Yes, we're engaged. We're getting married next month." Silence thickened like smoke. Blaine's jaw flexed. "Excuse me?" "That's right," Eli said. He folded his arms. "She and her daughter are staying here while we sort things out." Mendes arched a brow. "That's a new development." Emily's voice didn't falter. "We wanted to keep it private until the paperwork was filed." Blaine's eyes flickered with rage barely contained. "You think this performance fools anyone? You're putting this child in more danger by dragging a stranger into it." Eli stepped forward, his voice dropping to a low growl. "If something happens to this girl, it'll be because you keep showing up where you're not wanted. You've had your 10 minutes. Mendes shifted uncomfortably. "That's enough for now." But Blaine wasn't finished. He leaned close to Emily, his words like poison. "This isn't over. I will be back." Her eyes met his, steady and unflinching. "Then I'll be ready." The sedan pulled away, gravel spitting under its tires. Emily collapsed into the nearest chair, trembling. Eli stood at the window, watching until the car disappeared into the trees. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Yeah," he said, his jaw tight. "I did." Emily looked at him, her voice breaking. "He's not going to stop." "No," Eli replied, turning from the window. "But neither am I." The fire popped. Maisie clutched her rabbit tighter, and the cabin walls seemed to draw closer, sealing them inside a storm that had only just begun. The courthouse in Farrell wasn't grand, just a squat brick building with ivy curling along its edges. But that morning, it looked like a fortress. Rain slicked the stone steps, puddles gathering in the cracks, as Emily Rose climbed them with Eli Turner at her side. Her navy dress clung damp against her knees, the thrift store bracelet on her wrist spinning nervously as she twisted it over and over. Eli's hand brushed lightly against her back, steadying, though he said nothing. His silence was never empty. It was the kind of silence that carried weight, like cedar beams holding up a roof. Inside, the hall smelled of old varnish and paper. The ceilings were low, but the tension stretched higher than any cathedral. Janice Rowe was already waiting by the courtroom doors, leather folder under her arm, eyes sharp and unwavering. She'd flown in late the night before, former federal defender, now private practice, and she radiated the kind of calm fire that made lesser men sweat. "They're coming hard," she said without greeting. "Blaine's lawyer filed motions overnight. They're painting you," her eyes cut to Emily, "as unstable. And you, to Eli, as a shadow influence manipulating her. Emily swallowed hard. A what? A phantom. A dangerous outsider pulling strings behind the scenes, Janice explained. Then her gaze pinned Eli. You ready for that kind of scrutiny? He didn't flinch. Let them try. The double doors creaked open, and the courtroom swallowed them whole. Blaine was already seated at the plaintiff's table, his suit dark charcoal, his cufflinks glinting under the fluorescent lights. He didn't smile, but his eyes locked on Emily with the smug glimmer of someone convinced victory was already written. At his side sat Huxley Gray. Anger, a lean man with a perpetual smirk, the kind who weaponized charm until it cut flesh. The gavel cracked. All rise. Judge Miriam Collins presided, her silver hair pinned tight, glasses perched low on her nose. She had the air of a woman who'd seen too much corruption to be impressed by theatrics. The hearing began, and Huxley wasted no time. He rose, his voice slick as oil. Your Honor, we are here because this child's welfare is at risk. Miss Rose has a documented history of instability, emotional outbursts, inconsistent addresses, falsified school records, and now she has introduced a stranger into her daughter's life, a man with no legal ties, no marriage license, no standing. This is reckless at best, dangerous at worst. Emily's hands tightened on the table. Eli's jaw flexed, but he kept his eyes forward. Janice rose smoothly. Your Honor, opposing counsel spins shadows into monsters. Let's talk facts. Miss Rose raised her daughter alone after the father abandoned them. The supposed instability? Those were moves made to protect Maisie from an abusive environment. And this so-called stranger? She turned, gesturing to Eli. He's the one who stepped in when Blaine Harrow did not. He ensured the child had food, medical care, stability, all the things her uncle failed to provide. Huxley smirked. That's an interesting tale, but let's examine her records. He held up prescriptions for antidepressants, citing them as proof of Emily's mental fragility. He waved photographs, grainy, edited, to show Maisie crying. Emily flinched. For a moment, the weight of years pressed down, shame and fear threatening to crush her. But Eli leaned closer, his voice a low whisper only she could hear. Don't break. Not here. Her spine straightened. Then Janice struck back. Your Honor, we submit into evidence medical reports from 2 years ago, a nurse who documented bruising on Ma, Izzy's arm, consistent with abuse while under Mr. Harrow's supervision. That report was buried. We also submit emails from Mr. Harrow's assistant suggesting manipulation of custody paperwork. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Blaine's jaw tightened, his mask cracking just slightly. The judge's brow furrowed. Proceed. The climax came when Janice pressed play on a voicemail. Blaine's voice filled the room, slurred and venomous. You'll never get away from me, Emily. I'll bury you in paperwork until you choke on it. That girl belongs to me. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily stared at the table, hands trembling, but her chin stayed high. Maisie, seated quietly with Cora Sanders in the back row, peeked up, her wide eyes shimmering. Then came the moment no one expected. Judge Collins looked over her glasses at Maisie herself. Young lady, do you feel safe with your mother? Maisie stood on unsteady legs, rabbit clutched in her fist. Her voice was small but clear. Yes, ma'am. And this man? The judge gestured toward Eli. Maisie's eyes lit with shy confidence. That's Mr. Eli. He makes pancakes, and he doesn't yell. A tremor passed through the room, softer than thunder but more powerful than any lawyer's words. Janice seized the moment. Sometimes the purest testimony comes not from adults with polished statements, but from the child herself. Maisie doesn't fear her mother. She fears losing her. Judge Collins leaned back, pen tapping against her notes. We'll recess. I need time to review. The gavel struck again. The room exhaled, voices rising in whispers. Blaine shot Emily a look sharp enough to cut bone. This isn't over, his eyes promised. But when Eli reached for Emily's hand under the table, she didn't pull away. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like prey inside a courtroom. She felt like someone was standing beside her, truly beside her, ready to fight until the last gavel fell. The courthouse emptied under a sky heavy with rain. The storm that had threatened all morning finally broke, sheets of water hammering the pave, meant as though trying to erase the tension clinging to every brick. Emily held Maisie's hand tightly as they hurried down the steps, Janice's leather folder pressed against her chest like a shield. Eli walked behind them, his broad frame cutting a path through the crowd of umbrellas and whispering onlookers. Blaine Harrow lingered at the top of the steps, his suit immaculate despite the downpour. He didn't call out, didn't raise his voice. Instead, he smiled, a slow, calculated curl of the lips that promised retribution. Eli felt the weight of that smile like a shadow pressing on the back of his neck. By the time they reached the truck, Maisie's shoes were soaked through. Emily lifted her into the back seat, her own dress clinging to her legs, but her eyes never left Blaine. For years she had looked away, bowed her head, swallowed her fear. Not anymore. The drive back to the cabin was quiet, broken only by the steady slap of wipers against glass. Maisie leaned against her rabbit, humming the tune she always hummed when she was scared. Emily twisted the bracelet on her wrist until it cut into her skin. Eli kept both hands on the wheel, eyes scanning the rearview mirror. Twice he saw headlights trailing them. Once he turned suddenly down a side road and waited, the engine idling. The car behind them crawled past, too slow, then sped up into the storm. When they reached the cabin, the mountain seemed restless. Wind howled through the trees, bending the tall pines until they groaned. Rain drummed against the roof as Eli carried Maisie inside. Emily followed, her body taut with nerves. Janice had warned them, "Do not engage outside court, no social media, no rash moves, the judge will be watching for stability." But stability felt like a foreign word in that moment. That night, Eli kept the shotgun across his lap as he sat on the porch, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. The woods were darker than usual, alive with the sound of branches snapping, water rushing down gullies. Twice he thought he saw movement beyond the tree line, shadows shifting where no wind blew. He didn't call out. He didn't need to. Whoever was out there wanted him uneasy, and he wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Inside, Emily paced the living room, her voice low but urgent. "He's going to come after us harder now. You saw his face." "I saw a man losing his grip," Eli answered. "That makes him more dangerous." She glanced toward Maisie, who slept curled up under the patchwork quilt, Ruth's feather tucked in her fist. "He'll try to scare us, Eli. He's done it before. He'll send people." Eli shifted the shotgun, the wood worn smooth where his fingers rested. "Then we don't scare." But the truth was more complicated. At midnight, the crunch of tires reached them, faint but undeniable. Emily froze, every muscle locking tight. Eli stood, eyes narrowing. Headlights flashed once down the gravel road, then disappeared. Emily's voice was barely audible. "He's watching." The following morning brought no peace. Rain had stopped, but fog clung low, smothering the trees in gray. Eli went into town for supplies, and when he returned, Emily met him on the porch with a sheet of paper in her shaking hands. "It was under the door," she said. The paper was slick with damp. A printed photo showed Emily stepping out of the courthouse, Maisie at her side, Eli behind them. Across the bottom, in red ink, "She belongs to me." Eli's jaw tightened until it ached. "Where was Maisie when you found this?" "She didn't see it." He crumpled the page in his fist and tossed it into the fire. The flames devoured it instantly, but the smell lingered. That evening, they sat around the table. Emily's hands trembled as she tried to cut bread, her knife clattering against the plate. Maisie sensed it. She reached across the table, placing her tiny hand over her mother's. "Mama, it's okay. Mr. Eli will keep us safe." Emily's eyes brimmed, but she forced a smile. "Yes, baby. He will." Later, when Maisie had gone to bed, Emily lingered by the fire. Eli was carving quietly, the rhythm of knife against wood steady, controlled. She watched him for a long time before speaking. "Why are you doing this?" "Because once you see injustice, you can't unsee it." Her voice was soft but fierce. "You could walk away. You should walk away." Eli looked up, his eyes dark but steady. "Not anymore." The storm outside gathered strength again, branches clawing against the cabin windows. And as Emily met his gaze, fingers brushing his across the worn tabletop, she realized the lie of husband and wife had already grown into something larger, something terrifying and necessary. Because Blaine Harrow wasn't just coming for custody, he was coming for war. The courthouse was packed the morning of the final hearing. Word had spread through Farrell. This wasn't just a custody dispute anymore. It was a storm, and everyone wanted to see who walked out standing. The old wooden benches creaked under the weight of townsfolk, reporters with cheap cameras, and courthouse clerks whispering behind clipboards. Rain hammered the tall windows, a gray curtain that blurred the world outside. Emily sat at the defense table, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Maisie wasn't there. She'd been left in the care of Miss Ruby, hidden away from the storm that was about to break. Eli sat beside Emily, broad shoulders squared, jaw carved into stone. He had promised himself he would not flinch, not even once, no matter what Blaine brought into the room. Janice Rowe adjusted her glasses, her calm fire burning brighter than ever. "Stay steady," she murmured. "They'll play dirty today." Across the aisle, Blaine Harrow exuded confidence. His suit was immaculate, his tie a sharp red slash, his smile shark-like. Beside him, Huxley Granger smirked as though he had already won. On the table in front of them sat a thick folder sealed with a red ribbon, theatrically placed for all to see. Judge Miriam Collins entered. "All rise." The room stood, then settled, silence falling like a shroud. "Mr. Granger," the judge said, "you may proceed." Huxley rose, oozing confidence. "Your Honor, today we bring clarity. My client has been unfairly maligned by whispers and fabrications, but we bring evidence, final evidence, that proves Emily Rose has misled this court for years." He opened the folder with a flourish and pulled out a document. A marriage certificate, issued in Arizona 7 years ago between Emily Rose and Daniel Harrow, Blaine's late brother. By law, that makes Blaine Maisie's rightful uncle with legitimate claim to her welfare. Gasps rippled through the room. Emily's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. "That's a lie," she whispered. Huxley's smirk deepened. "The certificate is notarized, stamped, and filed, which means Emily Rose is not only unstable, she is a proven fraud, willing to rewrite her history to deny this child her bloodline." Blaine leaned back in his chair, smug satisfaction radiating off him like heat. Janice rose slowly. "Your Honor, if I may." But before she could finish, the back doors banged open, every head turned. Agent Denise Harper strode in, her navy suit darkened by rain, a folder under her arm. She didn't ask permission. She walked straight to the judge and handed over the file. "New evidence, Your Honor, straight from the Department of Child Protection's Special Investigations." The judge arched a brow. "Proceed." Agent Harper turned, her voice ringing through the chamber. "The so-called marriage certificate is a forgery. Our analysts found inconsistencies in the paper stock, the signatures, the notary stamp. It was manufactured recently. And more, we have obtained sealed hospital records and a DNA profile. Daniel Harrow was never Maisie Rose's father." The room erupted. Blaine's smug mask cracked, fury flashing across his face. "Lies," he barked, slamming a fist on the table. Agent Harper didn't flinch. "Maisie Rose's father is unknown, but what is certain is this. Blaine Harrow has no legal or biological claim to her. His entire case rests on fabricated documents and intimidation." The judge's gavel thundered. "Order!" Emily pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, tears burning her eyes. All the nights of fear, all the running, all the lies Blaine spun around her, shattered in a single revelation. Janice seized the moment. "Your Honor, I move that Blaine Harrow's petition be dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, given the pattern of falsification, intimidation, and abuse, I recommend sanctions and referral for criminal investigation." The judge leaned back, tapping her pen, her gaze cutting through Blaine like a blade. "Mr. Harrow, do you have anything to say?" Blaine stood, his composure unraveling. "That child belongs to me," he snarled, pointing across the room at Emily. "She always has, and no piece of paper will change that." But Eli rose slowly beside Emily, his voice steady as stone. "She doesn't belong to you. She belongs to herself, and to a mother who's fought harder than anyone ever should have to. You tried to break them. You failed." The silence that followed was electric. Blaine's face twisted, rage spilling from every pore, but the judge's gavel cracked down like thunder. "This court finds Blaine Harrow's petition baseless. Custody remains with Emily Rose. Further, I am ordering a formal investigation into Mr. Harrow's actions." The room exploded with noise, reporters scrambling, townsfolk murmuring, bailiffs moving to restrain Blaine as he shouted curses. Emily sat frozen, tears spilling freely. Eli touched her hand, grounding her, steady as the cedar beams of his cabin. When the judge's final words echoed through the chamber, "This hearing is adjourned," Emily leaned into Eli, her voice breaking into a whisper only he could hear. "It's over." But Eli, eyes fixed on Blaine being dragged from the room, knew better. "No," he murmured. "This round is over. The war isn't done." Emily turned to him, fear and gratitude swirling in her gaze, and when she finally let her fingers slip fully into his, it wasn't pretend anymore. Because sometimes the lie you tell to survive becomes the truth you can't live without.